This is the Politics of Everything, and I'm your host, Amber Daines. Welcome to the podcast where we want to discuss the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment to equality, and much more. Our guests are experts in their field or topic of choice, even if you've not yet heard their name. This is a bipartisan podcast, so while we love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate, by no means is this a one-sided forum for any one political view. So please listen up and enjoy the politics of everything. Welcome to the Politics of Everything. Today I am chatting to Jen Brown. We're discussing the politics of fear, one of our biggest emotional drivers. Jen is actually a trail running and triathlon coach, and she hosts the Sparta Chicks radio podcast and has a business of the same name. Sparta Chicks is a coaching business that supports women who participate in endurance sports and outdoor adventures. She helps them tap into their inner strength and chase their dreams with confidence. Jen's actually a former corporate lawyer, so she's really done two sides of the coin, if you like, the corporate life and obviously now the personal training and coaching business. She really is focused on helping women achieve their personal best in their sporting goals. She's also an author and a speaker. In her spare time, Jen can be found drinking coffee or exploring her beloved trails through the World Heritage listed areas of the Blue Mountains, which are just west of Sydney. Welcome to the podcast, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So excited to get into this. I mean, I guess for many of us, we either embrace fear or literally run away from it. What role has fear played in your life?
This is such a tough question for me. And as much as I hate to admit it, fear has been critically important in the development of who I am as a person and what I've achieved over the years. I hate the experience of fear. Nobody likes feeling afraid, and I hate that it's caused me to doubt and second guess myself, or feel insecure about decisions, or even paralyzed me from taking action from time to time. But at the same time, all of my greatest achievements, the things I am most proud of in life, have always been on the other side of fear. I've had to go through that experience of feeling afraid and learning how to manage that fear to achieve it. So I hate to admit it, but it has really been critically important in my journey so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you tap into something all of us can probably relate to, whether you're a child or an adult or where you are in your life, that sometimes having to face your fear and then make decisions around that, they can often lead to something even better. Do you have some tangible examples, or one big example that comes to mind that shows, I guess, the power of fear for good?
It's a good question. In my own life, there's been lots of things like calling off engagement,
that's a big one.
Making the decision to leave law, massive
yes.
decision for me. I am quite conservative, risk averse by nature. So that was a massive one, to leave that security blanket and that paycheck behind. And even my podcast, for me, that was something I was paralyzed by fear from taking action on I talked about it publicly for 12 months before I did it, and I was probably thinking about it for 2 years before I actually took the plunge. So there have been three things I can think of off the top of my head that were real massive sources of fear for me, but three decisions that have made a huge shift for the better in my life.
Absolutely. So if we step back a bit into when you were a lawyer, what initially attracted you to the law?
Honestly, probably watching far too much LA Law as a kid on TV.
Oh, that's going to date you. There's a whole bunch of people out there who are going, LA Law. For those of you who don't know, that was a big show in the 80s. And yes, we all watched it and thought that looked awesome.
Yeah, I'm 42. I was going to say I'm 41. No, I am 42 now. So there you go. I'll put that out there. Honestly, it's funny. I remember wanting to be a lawyer since the time I was sort of 14, 15, 16. And I don't remember why, other than LA Law, but I do remember thinking it seems like the hardest thing I could possibly think to do, which I would never recommend for anyone as a way to make a decision about your choice of career or path in life. And I have no idea why that was a driving force, or what drove me to choose to do something that I thought was so hard. But it turned out well. I mean, I have left the law now, but I was in it for 13 years and I did love it. So it wasn't a bad decision in the end.
I'd love to see it as part of your journey. I mean, I guess, what did it teach you working in an environment? I mean, from the outside, law often looks, yes, it is very intellectually challenging. It sounds like it's sometimes demanding in terms of your personal life too, and the hours you're expected to do if you want to climb that ladder. I mean, what did it teach you about discipline and perhaps a little bit about fear as well?
Discipline was a massive one, and it's interesting. It's still something that plays on my mind today. So if I'm working from home and I pack up my desk at 6 or 6:30, there's still this little part of my brain that goes, you should still be working. If you were still back in lawyer days, you would still be in the office still working. I don't think anyone could really get through law at university or stay in the legal career that long without being a naturally disciplined person. It's certainly not a profession that you can get through doing the minimum amount of work.
No, it doesn't seem like that at all. It just seems like there's a lot of reading, there's a lot of preparation. Which part of the law were you working in as well?
I spent 1 year as in commercial litigation and absolutely freaking hated it. And then I moved across to corporate law. So from that point on, it was all about the management of organizations, purchase and sale of businesses, shareholder arrangements, all sorts of fun stuff. I used to tease my friends who are in litigation by saying that I was the person who put deals together and they were the people who pulled deals apart. So
that's such a great analogy. And I guess that's often how we see it with lawyers. It's one side or the other. And just tapping into sort of your decision to leave. I mean, were you doing trail running and triathlons while you were a lawyer? How did you really get into that space?
So yes, I was. I started running somewhere around 2004, I think. I was very active through university, started working as a lawyer, and all that went out the window. Gained weight, working stupid hours, boozy lunches, the whole thing. And so I went back to the gym, and then a couple of years later, so 2004, I started running as a way to lose a bit of extra weight, as a way for extra stress relief. And then I was living in Mossman at the time, and one day I saw this little trail headed down the side of a house. I thought, I wonder where that goes. And I ran down there, and I was instantly hooked. Like, I knew in that moment I was meant to be a trail runner. I can't explain it.
That's incredible. I get goosebumps just hearing you describe that. And so did you do some training? How did you get ready for your first competitive run?
It just not so slowly built up. I made the classic beginner mistake of doing too much too soon, and so was constantly injured. I became a morning exercise person, which I could never have imagined in my life doing. So I used to get up in the morning and go for a run down around Bradley's Head and Balmoral and Mossman. And, it just became a source of space and clarity and calm for me. It was a way to put a pause in a very busy existence. And I've always found that being on the trails gives me energy. I come back tired, but at the same time I come back energized.
That makes sense. I mean, I think sometimes we talk about, not all of us may have done such competitive or long distance training, but that runner's high. I mean, I definitely have experienced that, and you are physically tired, but you also feel amazing. It's hard to describe, and it is addictive.
It is absolutely addictive. The best way I can describe it is I was in Nepal on a trip once, and I was in a bookshop in Nepal, of all places, and I opened up this book that had some stunning pictures of the Himalayas, and there was a quote by a 17th century Chinese poet whose name escapes me at the moment. And the quote was, "The body roams the mountains and the soul is set free."
That's definitely something I think most of us seek, particularly if we live busy, modern, 24-hour connected lives. And I guess if you go back into the idea of the element of fear, I mean, what are some of the fears you had to overcome when you became serious about the trail running side of what you wanted to achieve?
Oh God, everything from the internal fear of judgment. What will people think? I'm not a runner. I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. I'll never be fast. All that sort of internal stories that we tell ourselves. But then also the external things. So going out into the bush or into the mountains, there are external factors to consider, such as accidents, snakes, people with malicious intent, all those sorts of things that are often, they're factors that we include, they're factors we take into account when you make the decision to go out into the bush.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I guess it's not sort of like being in a sterile gym environment where it's all controlled and air conditioned and, if you want to go get a drink of water, you go get a drink of water. You want something to eat or a coffee, you just, there's usually a cafe, and it's a very different experience. So with your decision to leave the law for good, did you then go straight into running a personal training business?
I did. I actually overlapped the two, which was even crazier in hindsight. So I started studying personal training while I was still working as a lawyer. I did the course by distance, and it took me 18 months at the time. And at the time, it's a course that you can do in 5 or 6 weeks full time, but it took me 18 months to do all the study. And then I started training some friends after hours who were very accommodating of my wayward hours and on the weekends, built up a business. And then I was lucky enough, I had the opportunity to go part-time as a lawyer. So I switched down to part-time hours and then was able to build the business up. And then eventually set an exit date from the law. And despite my employer at the time throwing more money and longer contracts at me, I finally had to make the decision to walk away from the law, and then shifted into full-time personal training.
And how long ago was that?
I left the law in July 2012. 5 years.
Okay, so some time ago.
2011, sorry, 2011.
Okay, so we're talking sort of, 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
So with that decision, you leave something where there's probably guaranteed income and then you start a business. A few of us have been there. One tap doesn't just turn on when you turn the other one off. So did you have enough clients in the beginning? How did you really, I guess, embrace the fear of being an entrepreneur?
I'm still not sure I have embraced it, to be honest. I had a part-time personal training business at the time. I had funds, some savings. I can't remember, 6 months of operating costs, or living costs, that sort of thing. A very supportive husband. And I think I've always had a sense that I will land on my feet.
That's interesting. So even though we are obviously unpacking ideas around fear, and you've discussed some of your own personal experiences with fear, there's also this inner sense of belief by the sounds of it.
Yeah. I mean, I was raised, my parents always told me there was, I could do anything I set my mind to. And so I think I don't know whether it is inherently because of their support over the years. And I do think, trail running, mountaineering, all that sort of stuff builds that body of evidence or knowledge of the situations, the prior situations you've been in that you've managed to get yourself out of. So I think I've probably always had that sense of I will land on my feet, and I can basically survive pretty much anything life throws at me. So I am still paralyzed by fear at times, but it's sort of coupled or the way I get through it is to pull on that sort of sense of I'll land on my feet and everything will be fine. And this is really important to me, so I need to pursue this thing.
Absolutely. And I guess that puts you in a great position with Sparta Chicks, the women you work with who might come to you at various, physical and mental limitations they think they have, but they have big goals, I imagine, many of which, some of us can't even picture getting ready for a massive trail run or doing any of the sort of stuff I've seen you achieve. So, I mean, at the end of the day, do you really think anyone can say run a marathon?
Yes. Yes, I do. Not 99.9999% of people could. I think there are two big challenges when it comes to running and marathons in particular. And the first is that the majority of people weren't very good at sports as kids, or didn't enjoy sports as a child, or have horror memories of school, swimming carnivals or sports carnivals. And so they've carried this story of themselves throughout their life that they're not very sporty. They're not good at sports. They're not a runner. They've never been a runner. They'll never be a runner. So this perception of who they are or aren't they've carried it through their lives, and it's shaped all the decisions they've made. I have lost count of the number of times women have told me that they're not very sporty. And that sometimes includes women who have finished marathons. So somehow...
Interesting. Even if they've had the experience of, obviously, success, if you like, in that realm, they would still say, it's sort of maybe I can't do this again, or I can't do it, better. Yeah.
Or I'm not a runner, even though I've finished 8 City to Surfs, because I think, thinking back to when I started running, I called myself a jogger for probably the first 6 months, because in my head, when I said runner, in my head, the imagery I had was like a 6 foot tall African man in those horrendous side split shorts, running a marathon at the Olympic Games at a pace
like a Usain Bolt or someone like that.
At a pace I can't even sustain to, get across the road to avoid getting hit by a bus. So in my head, I had that perception of that is a runner, and because I don't fit that mold, or I can't do that, therefore I'm not a runner. And so this narrative, this story we have about what we can and we can't do, we carry that sort of, air quotes, baggage through our lives. And so we aren't even open to the idea of being able to run a marathon.
So when you work with women, obviously everyone's different, and, there's not a one size fits all approach. I mean, what are some of the ways in which you work through, I guess, the mental and the physical barriers that people might perceive are there for them?
Physical stuff is actually the easiest. It is so much easier to do. And the mental stuff is what holds all of us back. The physical side is actually easy to develop. And I just think there's some basic mistakes a lot of people make that sabotage themselves.
So can you give us an example? It'd be great to hear. What would be sort of the number one thing that you hear as the self-sabotaging talk, if you like?
From the self-sabotaging talk, it tends to be, I'll never be a runner, or I'll never be very good at running. And the other one I hear quite a lot is I am not good enough, I'm not ready, I don't belong, or I don't fit in this world. And so people say no to races. They say no to, a group of friends is going out for a training run, and they say, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I don't fit in, I'll say no to this opportunity.
Right. And I guess for you, you've got to encourage them to say yes, otherwise they might never give it a go.
Exactly. So giving people permission to do what they want to do is actually a large part of my job. And it's almost, I need to give them permission before they'll trust themselves enough to give themselves permission, in a strange sort of way.
No, that does make sense. Often we are looking for validation, and I suppose your own experience and your own vulnerabilities, if you can sort of, tap into that in yourself and remember what that's like, then that must also create a little bit of a community feel for them as well, that it's not like, I haven't been where you've been, I've walked in your shoes in a similar way, and look, this is what you can achieve.
Absolutely. People often accuse me of reading their minds or reading their diaries, neither of which I can do, unfortunately. But it is because it's a shared experience. We all have that experience of feeling that we're not ready, that we're not good enough, that we don't belong. And that is both from sports perspective, relationships, work. It's a common fear that humans have across the board. And so it is a common experience we all share, but often we don't talk about it because we don't want to share that vulnerability with others. And so it's very easy to feel isolated and alone, as though you're the only person who feels that way. So when you can come along, and whether that's it with our guests on the podcast or even just a private conversation with someone, when I'm able to share my story or the stories of other people, I think opening that door and letting people know that it's really common and normal to feel what you're feeling. Here are some strategies to help. And now go off and do it. Here's your permission slip.
Exactly.
Go and do it. Yeah.
Okay. So sort of bringing it back into the topic of fear, I mean, what's your sense of how fear and I guess success can coexist? It sounds like even though you've had some success and you are accomplished in what you're doing with the trail running and your business, there is still those niggling fears. I mean, how does that play out for you? How do you manage it?
There are always niggling fears. I don't think anyone ever is completely fearless. And if they say they are, they're kidding themselves, really. I think there's two things. I think you cannot experience success without fear. I think fear is that element that pushes you beyond the comfort zone, beyond the things you're doing, what are comfortable, to try new things, to do things differently. But at the same time, you can absolutely feel fear and not have success when you listen to the fear more than you listen to the goals or the dreams that you have. So even just being cognizant of the need to prioritize your fears versus what you want to achieve is one of the biggest strategies, because so often I think we just listen to our fears. Our fears are so loud in our head.
They are. And often even when we've had success, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs that I've worked with in my business, and some of them are phenomenally successful, however you define success, it could be monetarily or they've won lots of awards, they still have that imposter syndrome. They still feel like they're going to be found out, even if they've got all the accolades in the world. So I think what you're saying is very relevant to all of us.
I think imposter syndrome or imposter complex is one of the most commonly shared experiences we have, and the least talked about in a very open way. We did a podcast interview with Tanya Geisler, who is a leadership expert, primarily focused in women in the imposter complex. She's a coach I'm working with at the moment as I deal with, you know, my imposter stuff as well. That episode, I've had people tell me it made them cry. I've had people tell me it made the hairs on the back of their neck stand up. I've had people tell me they had to turn it off because it was hitting too close to home. So I think having these conversations about the realities of fear is really important. Even between friends, you know, we're quite often honest with our closest friends, but we don't hop on Facebook and tell the world our fears. And then realizing that what you're experiencing is really normal, but making sure that you have the strategies in place to move past them.
Absolutely. And I think if you can move past it, obviously, then you get to that greater place as well. And I guess in your life, I mean, I never think anyone's done whatever they've done on their own. Are there any mentors or inspirational figures, even if you can't name them or don't wish to name them, that you draw your inspiration from? I mean, if so, sort of what have they taught you about business and life?
I don't have any direct mentors. I have a lot of friends who primarily women, I am lucky enough to call my friends, who I am inspired by, I watch and I learn from. Beyond my inner circle, women like Amelia Earhart. If I could have anyone on the podcast, I would want to talk to Amelia Earhart, because...
Except that she's dead, but yes.
Well, mere detail. But
yeah, just minor detail, bring her back. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So that pioneering spirit is something which clearly motivates you and inspires you in others.
Absolutely. And it was not just pioneering spirit, but pioneering spirit, but, you know, to do what she did and what she attempted to do in her industry, in her time, when society would have been screaming at her to play the traditional role. Even women like Serena Williams, her strength, her sass, and her ability to stand and acknowledge her strength and her greatness very publicly is something most women find very difficult, if not impossible to do. And I wish more of us would be able to stand there and say, yes, this is what I've done. I'm really proud of it, without deflecting, without feeling the need to downplay our achievements. Even when you were talking earlier, you were reading my bio, there's a little part of me that felt that feeling of wanting to downplay my achievements.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think often you look back on something and like you say, particularly if someone else is sharing that story about you, think is that me? Have I really done all that? And even we're often really reluctant to celebrate our success. And maybe it's very much an Australian mindset, that tall poppy syndrome too. We don't really want to stand out in a way, even if we've done amazing things and we know that others can benefit from it. I do feel a sense of everyone kind of wants to just sort of, be a bit more of a shrinking violet, which, who wants to really do that? But, there is a sense of us not wanting to show off, if you like.
Yeah. And I think too, I don't know if it's just an Australian thing so much as a human DNA conditioning thing. We have been conditioned for generations and generations to fit in, to conform. The people who stood out were the people who ended up being the outcasts. And so we're probably fighting a combination of evolution, human development, society conditioning, even the things we've been raised by our parents and our family members. We're fighting against a lot of conditioning there, but it's really important to stand there and say, look, yeah, I did that and I'm really proud of that.
It does remind me of that quote, and I can't remember who said it, well-behaved women really make history. And I often think of that as, not everyone's obviously going to be remembered by name, but even in your sphere, in your own circle of people who matter to you, if you can do things which I guess have a legacy impact and are moments that you can be proud of, that's really what life has to be about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're going to wrap up. So if you could just close off by sharing, I guess, some big picture ideas, maybe 2 or 3 tips for listeners who are trying to perhaps battle their own politics of fear, what would they be? What would be sort of some mantras or ideas which you would love to leave as your legacy for this particular episode of The Politics of Everything?
I would say one would be to think of your fears as stories you tell yourself. Because I think,
and by that you mean when they're not true?
Well, they may not be true. And that's the thing. Quite often we think of our fears as fact, as things we cannot do. We tell ourselves these stories about what we can and we can't do. We take them as fact. We don't question them, and we assume that there's nothing we can do to change them. But when you start to look at them as stories or fairy tales, I think at a subconscious level, it sort of opens the door and it gives you more room to question them, to understand them, to understand what's underlying them. And one of the biggest things I've had women do with success is look for evidence of things that prove your fears or your stories are wrong. So if your story is you're not very good at business, look for examples of times in your life that prove that story is not wrong. So it might be the clients you've helped, the awards you've won, the books you've written, whatever it is. If your story is that you're not meant to be a runner or you'll never be a runner, look for all those times that you did run. Whether it doesn't matter whether it's 100 meters or 100 kilometers, there are always times in your life that prove your stories and your fears are wrong. So really challenge yourself to examine those fear stories you're telling yourself.
I think that's a fantastic piece of advice, and we really have valued having you on the podcast. Everyone, if you want to contact Jen Brown, there will be some details of her podcast and website on our show notes. You've been listening to The Politics of Everything. I'm Amber Daines, and until next time, keep well. Thanks for listening today. If you've enjoyed The Politics of Everything, we thrive on feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network and your friends and family. I'm also always on the hunt for fabulous new guests. So if you've got a view to share and an idea how to get our listeners excited, please email me at amber@bespokecoms, that's BESPOKECOMMS.com.au, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Until next time.